Okay, welcome back to the Jiu-Jitsu Mindset. It's a good day today because I got my partner in crime with me. I have my professor, Professor Lucas.
Let's yo. Good morning. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm doing good. I'm guessing in these previous shows where we've missed you, it's that you might not have been properly fueled for the day. Are you at a submission copy? Do I need to bring you a
So
bag or
I'm,
something?
I'm actually having my submission coffee right now to make sure I can go through the day.
Okay, excellent. I know we have a lot of our teammates are competing this weekend,
Yeah.
and we still are not identified as a performance enhancing drug. So
Or Miss Ann.
when we sweep things, I don't want anybody to come back and try to pin that on us. Professor Lucas, look, we just like week after week, we get to talk to just extraordinary people, and
Yes.
the divine has smiled on us again. We have yet another person who has really broad relationship to the art, to legends in the art. He's done extraordinary things himself. I think it's going to be really enlightening for people who are new
Mhm.
and for people who have been around for a while and will
Yeah.
recognize some of these names. It's going to be pretty exciting. So, Professor Jeff Serafin, thank you for spending time for us. We really are glad that you're here today.
Thanks for having me. I always love to talk jiu-jitsu and meet new people and help spread the word of the art. So great to be on with you.
In that same vein of spreading the word of the art, Professor Lucas and I began this podcast a couple years back with the hopes of getting people not to quit their jiu-jitsu journey or to try their jiu-jitsu journey, to lower the anxiety of what does it mean to step on the mat for the first time. And then once you get there, we observe too many people quitting too soon, where they didn't get the full advantages and benefits that come along with the jiu-jitsu. As somebody who's been so dedicated to the art for so long, when you think about life, had you gone a different route versus the route you've taken, what might have been different for you both as a person and maybe what you might have been doing?
It's hard for me because I started jiu-jitsu as a 15-year-old kid who didn't have a ton of direction.
Mhm.
And I took my first jiu-jitsu class and I told my parents afterwards, I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And I want to teach jiu-jitsu. And in 1998, when that happened, no one was really making money, especially in the Midwest. My coach was a blue belt who had a full-time job as a steel worker. But I didn't do this for me. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't have a ton of direction. I was a good student. Like I wound up getting into a partial academic scholarship to go to college, but I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to train jujitsu. But my parents was, hey, go to college. There's no real money to do jujitsu. You can keep training. I taught a club on campus. And I probably would have wound up going the traditional, like get an office job, go to grad school. People are like, oh, you should be a lawyer. You're good at reading and analyzing. And I just have no idea who the person I would. Jiu-jitsu has made me the person I am. It's created relationships for me. It's just done everything in my life I have now, whether it's my business, whether it's the home I'm living in, whether it's the car I'm driving, whether it's all the closest friends I have. Jiu-jitsu has really brought me into the life I have. It's made me the person I am and the connections I've made with all these cool people on the mats, off the mats, because we share this common interest in jiu-jitsu and this common love for pushing ourselves in the mats, meeting new people, exploring the art. So it's so hard to even feel what I would be doing or where I would be. I
Yeah.
just know I wouldn't be as happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
This is like a love at first sight story. If you're a young man, your perspective on the world is as broad as a 15-year-old's can be, which is to say you hadn't had a ton of life experiences. Do you have a sense of what was it in the experience that connected so deeply with you so immediately? Because to many young people might say, this is what I want to do, but it's not what they want to do because they
yeah.
don't know themselves well enough. However, in your case, you were right because this has been the organizing principle of your life.
Mhm.
Do you have a sense of, or how might you describe why it was such a bullseye, such a precise fit?
So for me, like I had watched the early UFCs with my dad growing up as a kid, like a 9 to 10-year-old seeing Royce Gracie fight in UFC. I knew I wanted jiu-jitsu to try it because it just looked so cool. And it was so different than baseball or flag football and basketball, these sports I did when I was little. And when I got in there, when I just felt how, even though I knew I wasn't going to be good, I never trained anything. Everyone I was training with was older and bigger, but the way they were just able to technically do whatever they wanted to me and just make me feel helpless. And they weren't going hard. They could tell they were barely using energy. They were barely doing anything. And I had no idea what they were doing. And even though I'd watched your fights, I knew what a triangle choke was. I had no chance to stop it or no way to defend it. And just that idea of it was like a superpower. And I wanted to learn that superpower. And every day I came in and trained after that, it never lost that luster or that allure. And 6+ years later, I'm still learning new things and I still have that same desire to learn. So it was just that ability of there's so much I don't know and there's so much that I want to use and learn. And this is going to be an art that's going to teach me all these things. And it clicked right away and just felt natural. I wasn't good. And it took a long time to even think I was good on the mat, but it was never demoralizing because I knew I was learning something. And that idea that I'm always going to be learning a new thing. And like I said, it's never really stopped learning has been this like, kind of thing that from the day one till 26 years later has pushed me to keep learning and loving it.
Yeah. Professor, I am curious one thing. Well, it's been 20 plus years that I have been in the art. And from day one, you decide, okay, that's what I'm doing for a living. And that's why we're doing it until now. But I'm sure, like all of us, you had moments like ups and downs that maybe you question why you're doing, or man, is that really, or my body can't handle anymore, or whatever reason it was. But that, I believe that's a common thing that all of us feel with everything, right? And some of us, some of them, they use that as excuse to quit and man, you know what, I'm going for something else. So 2 questions. Do you have a situation like that where you question a little bit and maybe you wasn't as excited to keep doing this? And if you had, how was your mentality to deal with that situation and keep pursuing what you did to now?
So I never had a mental feeling like I didn't want to do this. I've never lost that passion. I don't remember ever going to the mat one day not wanting to be there. But I did have a point when I was early in my black belt where I got a very bad injury. I ruptured my abdominal muscles and had to go to the hospital and I couldn't stop bleeding internally from it. And after I saw a surgeon, he told me basically after explaining what I do for a living, how it happened, he basically said I shouldn't do jiu-jitsu anymore. And I had to look myself in the mirror that there's a small chance that this may not be able for me. Maybe I can't compete. Maybe I can't roll. I have to figure out what I'm going to do if this is the case. Like most jujitsu guys, I put in a jujitsu context. How can I figure out how to solve this problem that I have in front of me, this bad injury, by using the ideas I've created on the mat? So I had to learn, basically relearn my jujitsu. I had to change my specific game that I was playing. I had to change how I moved on the mat so that my body could heal. And then a few years later, I had re-injured the same injury a few more times, trying to get back too early. And then after finally just changing the grappler, I was able to get back to it, get back to competition. But it took a long time, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of just advanced problem solving. Okay, if I move my body this way and it puts me in pain, how can I do something else that's still effective from my guard here? And that's like the only time in my career that I really had any doubts that I couldn't do this forever. And it was just mainly because the doctors were telling me that my body was just not responding. But again, like most things, you push through, if you keep working, if you really put time into trying to figure out the right and smartest way around it, we got back to it. Now that's just in the past, and knock on wood, I won't have that injury or that problem ever again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it starts there. I think the way how jiu-jitsu is like learning how to move yourself and move people around, right? Try to find the perfect angle and understand options. And 1 inch to a right or to the left is going to give you different things. When you apply this to life, which Professor Jeff did, and okay, we have a problem, but we're going to solve this problem. I just need to think through it and see what options I have, right? I think that's one of the best. It's similar to what Bas Rudin said, giving having jiu-jitsu a situation where we can just, is the problem solving ability, right?
Yeah. Professor Jeff, we had Bas Rutten send us a video, and he had a terrible shoulder injury, which didn't allow him to draw back a bow. And he, in a similar manner, simply thought the problem through and came up with a solution that on the surface, it was like, no, this can never happen. Like, like you can no longer do this thing. And he figured it out. That intellectual connection between the mind and the body is something that I love to repeat that conversation with people, because so many jiu-jitsu players have a real cerebral connection to what they're doing. And for you to have, okay, I have to relearn my game after you've, been a black belt for, must have been a psychologically taxing experience, because you spent all this energy learning a particular avenue into competition and to rolling, and to have to redo it. To me, that talks a lot to your mental strength. Not everybody's going to know your sort of competitive landscape, all the different way you've won. You got to take us 25 minutes to go through just listing all the competitions you've won. Could you talk a little bit about the breadth of your competitive experiences as a competitor and also as a coach? Because I know you've coached a lot of people that have competed at the highest levels of the art.
Yeah, so I started competing right away in jiu-jitsu in the late 90s, and I've just competed all over the country, competed all the big tournaments, Pans and Worlds and stuff. I competed in the ADCC trials back when it was invite only, 2006. They invited 16 people per weight class, and I wound up getting invited to that. One of my biggest wins in competition, I wound up fighting Tom DeBlas. I was one of the only people who's ever submitted him in jiu-jitsu competition.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was early in both my and Tom's careers. I was a professional MMA fighter too. I was 6-1 as a pro, fought in King of the Cage, Pro Fight Challenge, Iron or Crown. And I've won tons of pro shows. But for me, my competition life is mainly more as a coach. I've been lucky to coach guys who have fought in UFC, Pride, Sengoku. And for my gym, we've had world gi medalists, no gi worlds medalists, no gi world champions, no gi pants champions. Pretty much every major tournament, we've had someone win ADCC trials medals. And there's just a few months ago, one of my black belts, Chris Wojcik, just took fourth place at ADCC. Came out and got fourth at the ADCC at the 88 kilogram division. It beat Josh Hinger, beat Charles Negromonte, which was probably obviously one of the highest levels of the sport. So Chris has been my protege coming up, getting all his belts through me. And it was great to see our jiu-jitsu and our team at the highest level. And just got back a couple months ago. So it was such a great experience. And now we're getting bunch of people ready for No-Gi Worlds. We have a bunch of super fights going on this weekend. We have competitors competing almost every weekend of the year all over the country. So.
Yeah, Chris was here with us 2 episodes, and it was a great conversation. It was maybe like a month or 2 weeks before ADCC. So it was really nice to see him perform so well there.
Yeah, he's an absolute, that kid is just very special minded athlete for jiu-jitsu. He's really has a unique perspective on the sport and the art, what it means. And he's the most dedicated athlete I've ever trained or coached. He's the most coachable athlete I've ever been around in any jiu-jitsu, MMA. And just amazing to see someone who's put in that hard work and put in all this time, really paying the dividends now and getting to where he could get. Can't wait for the next ADCC in 2026 to see him back out there.
Yeah, his intellect was so obvious in our conversation that his mind as a thinker connected to being an athlete was on display in our conversation. It was a pleasure to have that conversation. Having had such a interesting and long competitive career, and then as a coach, when you think of the role of competition in the acquiring of jiu-jitsu skills and all the things that jiu-jitsu gives a person, what role do you think competition plays for those whose goals are not necessarily to be a world champion, because that's a particular route, but the vast majority of us are not headed in that direction. So I'm curious about your perspective of when you look at your students who are not necessarily headed in that direction, what you advise them about competition.
I always tell people competition is a personal choice. So I don't push students to compete. It's funny that beyond just saying, hey, we have a few local tournaments coming up. If you guys are interested in competing, talk to me. I can help decide if it's a good fit for you or what tournament might be the best to try. I don't push people to compete. You don't need to win a tournament to get a belt. You don't need to win a tournament to get to to help instruct or any of these things. But it seems that the vast majority of my students just want to compete, even though more hobbyist ones. Most of them, like you said, aren't trying to be world champs. They're not trying to train full time, but they just want to test themselves, mainly because a lot of the people they train with are going out and competing. So if they were like, if I'm showing up to the same class, training with the same people, and they're winning at the Pans or the No-Gi Worlds, maybe they'll give it a try. And I try to prepare them as much as they can, just getting them used to what a competition is going to feel like compared to what it feels like to train in the gym. And it's that thing that I think competition is good for people, even if it's just a local Fuji or Grappling Industries or a small tournament, just to say, hey, get outside your comfort zone, see what it's like to be under the pressure, because again, it's going to help you with the rest of your life. If you can do something as nerve-wracking as getting on a competition mat, fighting someone you don't know, and a rule set that is a little bit more foreign than just training at the gym where you can do whatever you need to do, I think it's a great thing, but I don't think it's necessary. I have black belts, never competed one time. They're more of the outliers, but they're just as good at jiu-jitsu. They just have a different goal. They're doctors, they're lawyers. They don't have that time or that ability to risk their livelihood getting hurt. But I would say 80% of my students at this point have competed or compete regularly, even though most of them, 80% of those 80% are complete hobbyists who do this only for fun.
Right.
But I just think jiu-jitsu is like everything else. If you try jiu-jitsu, it's going to help you. If you try to compete generally, it's going to help you. I just think you have to decide if you have the extra time and effort to make that commitment to be a competitor. Because what I don't want somebody to do is just compete, but not put in the time and then get hurt or get discouraged like we were talking about and leave jiu-jitsu because, oh, I lost this tournament and I got killed. So if you didn't put in the time to compete, then we don't need to compete. If you had that desire, that interest, we can help you get ready and frame it to how it's going to be. No guarantee you're going to win or lose, but we're going to make sure that you're prepared so it's not going to be a negative experience.
Yeah.
Part.
That's, I like it a lot what you said, Professor. I do something similar here all with my students. I don't push anyone to compete, but I recommend that to try this once in their career, on their jiu-jitsu journey, right? Usually on white belt, if you can start doing that, might be better than just jump as a brown or black belt or very first tournament, right? But, and then you see that I rarely have a conversation with a student where after the first tournament, they say something different, but, oh, I love it. I want to do it again. Usually that's their failure. But then, again, depending on what they do for a living, they can only commit themselves for a certain amount of training and everything. And then they cycle pretty more often and they start like building that expectations. And with that come the frustrations, right? To a point that eventually someone can give up doing that. So it's interesting because I believe it helps to put yourself in a stressful situation, see how you do, right? But if you want to keep doing that, things need to change on your lifestyle for be able to keep doing that in a way that will be benefit for you. Right?
So,
I
Professor,
always think, I was going to say, it's always funny for me is I have these guys who will come in and tell me, I don't want to compete. I'm a doctor. I'm a dentist. I can't get hurt. I'm like, great. You don't ever have to. And then 6 months later, they're traveling across the country to do tournaments and telling me they're changing weight classes. They're hiring a dietitian and they're hiring a strength conditioner. Losing 20 pounds. Great. But you were the guy who told me you're never going to compete. And I felt great. And now I have to pull the reins to be like, hey, you're competing a little bit too much. Like you're losing sight of what we're really doing this for. So that sometimes is definitely the case.
Yeah. So in all, you have all these experiences as a competitor, and maybe we'll ask about you as a coach too, but as a competitor yourself, if I ask you the question, what's your most memorable fight? I'll give you a second to see what comes into your mind. And I ask you that question, not just like the Tom DeBlasque, that must have been really memorable given both of your ascendancies to lots of people knowing about you. But I think in conflict, two things happen, like we get changed, something happens to us and then our character also gets revealed, I think also. So we learn things about ourselves, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So I'm curious, like when you think about the fight that comes to mind as your most memorable, those two things, how did it change you? And then what did you learn about yourself in that fight?
So I think my most memorable fight competition was actually one of my MMA fights. I fought in a show called the Ironheart Crown, which is the biggest show in Chicago back when I was fighting and back in the early days of mixed martial arts. And some of the all-time legends, Stephan Bonner, Miguel Torres, all the best fighters in the Midwest kind of came up through that card. And it's a card that when I was a young kid just starting out in jiu-jitsu, it was the kind of show I would see with my dad live. So getting to fight on that card was a huge deal. And I was pretty well known in the Chicagoland area from jiu-jitsu and had some fights. And literally 3 weeks before my debut there, I broke my shin in my right leg. It was actually funny. I did it competing at a jiu-jitsu tournament. We got in a weird scramble where I jumped guard and his shin came up and it cracked my shin. I had a hairline fracture. And I was just one of those things that I couldn't pull out of this fight. I've been dreaming about fighting in this show since I was a 14, 15-year-old kid. And I was on this, and I'd been putting all these hours and months of training into it. And I decided I'm going to fight. And since I was known as a grappler, I knew my opponent was going to strike with me. I was like, hey, if I can just get this guy to the ground where I'm good, I'm going to be no problem. So we get there, we tape my shins up so that I'm ready to fight. And immediately in the fight, I take him down. And I didn't know going in, he had a catch wrestling background. After I took him down, he immediately starts attacking my broken leg and a heel hook. And I'm just like, luckily, I've been a leg lock guy since I early started. I had good defense. I got out and we got back to the feet. And I wound up using my striking to knock him out with a knee to the head. And it was just this culmination that proved that I was like a true mixed martial artist. I went in as a grappler thinking as long as I'm grappling, I'm safe. I started getting in a bad position with injury I had. I was able to push through and persevere and then use the striking and the Thai boxing I've been working for the last few years. And, I got to win it in the show in front of a hometown crowd that I've been going to and being a part of, work through this injury, show my whole mental as a martial artist. And that after that day, I really felt like I could fight in any realm. I could defend myself, and I could strike with strikers, I could wrestle with wrestlers, I could grapple with grapplers. And I knew I had the mental fortitude to be in the cage or the ring on the competition match with anyone. And that just helped really propel me into the confidence of what I could do on the mat and in the rings.
Yeah.
What made you stop competing in MMA?
I got offered a full-time job to teach jiu-jitsu. And I kind of looked at myself in the mirror, and I've always been a realist. And I was like, I was a good MMA fighter, and I probably would have gotten to the UFC at a low level, but I was not going to be a UFC world champion. I was not going to be George St. Pierre. Some of my students that were teaching at the time were like ranked in the top 10, 15 in the world in MMA. We're just so much higher level athletes than I ever was. And I just realized it's like, this is a much better opportunity where I can do what I love for 30 years or 2 or 3 years fighting for a few $1,000s. And if I'm lucky, I don't get really injured.
Yeah.
So I got my 7 fights. I had my fun. I have my experience. Let's just get to the more, and honestly, as much as I loved fighting, I still do. Jiu-jitsu is my true passion. I knew I could still compete in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Best of both worlds.
Awesome.
In all the instruction that you received as a student, you've been in proximity to some of the most important people that are in the jiu-jitsu world now and in the past. When you think about the lessons you learned and the people you learned from, what stands out as some of the most important times and advice that you received from those folks along the way?
We know it's funny. Like you said, I've been lucky. I've learned from all these legends of the early days of the sport, like Megaton Diaz and Jack McVicker, my 2 coaches who I got my black belt from, who are these old school legends who competed in every gi competition, world's medalists, for all these things. And they were both big people, and just idea that one, like we were talking about, if you want to be great at the sport and really learn, push yourself. So compete, do things that are uncomfortable, do different rule sets, just try things to make yourself more complete, especially if this is what you want to do for a living and you're a coach. You need to be the most complete jiu-jitsu person you can. So gi, no gi, submission only, just compete and fight and push yourself so that when your students come to you later, you can have those experiences to really, know what it's like. Because again, not that you have to be, again, a world champion to be a coach, but if I have a student who comes to me and they want advice and I've never done this or that or this, it's very hard for me to give them that good advice that I feel I can give them. Where now I've competed in almost every rule set I've fought, I've trained. My students compete everywhere. So it's really helped me to be a more complete martial artist and jiu-jitsu player, not just to be like, oh, I do the IBJJF and I do the gi and that's what I'm good at. So that's all I do. Or I only do no gi because that's what I'm better at. Or I only do sub only because that's easier for me. They were always early advocates just to push yourself. And if you lose and you go out there, no one's going to remember you lose. But if you win, great. No one's really going to remember that either, other than you, but it's going to make you better. And, the idea of, oh, you could lose students or you could lose this, that should never be in the mindset of what you're doing this for. And if you don't want to do that, it's not to say that's wrong, but this is something you have to understand is if you want to be the best coach and the best version of yourself, you have to put yourself in uncomfortable things. You have to try things that may not be your comfort zone. And if you do, it's going to make you a tougher student. You're going to be a tougher teacher. You're going to be a more complete teacher. And then when your students come to you with these questions and ideas, should I do this? What's the best case? I can give them a real perspective. So that's been something that's really been useful. And then a more like small note, one of the things that I've helped me more than anything is when I started teaching full-time, my coach Jack gave me a piece of advice. He's like, everyone already understands jiu-jitsu. If you're getting to this point where you're at, no one's going to be like, why are you teaching this? They're going to know that. Just connect with people on a personal level and get to know them. And if you connect to your students, the people you train with, simple things is remember the names, remember who they are, remember what their goals are personally, and not making it about you and what you want them to do. Your students are going to connect with you and they're going to fall in love with jiu-jitsu more because you're not being forced to do things. And the people that are teaching them and training them know they're there as care about them and take an interest in what they want.
Yeah.
And from that, I've luckily had students who've been training with me now 20 straight years, 18 straight years, 17 straight years. Most of the assistant instructors in my academy have been with me at least 15 years. I've watched these people grow up. They've watched me grow up. And it's simply because we push each other and care about each other.
Professor Lucas has been trying to shake me, actually. I've been his student now for almost 5 years. He's like, how do I get rid of this particular stuff? But in general, you would find his ethic the same as yours. Particularly, the name thing is impressive to me, his ability to remember everybody's names. And it sounds like that's something that Professor Jeff, you think's important as well. And I think we've used this expression before. You come for the jiu-jitsu and stay for the people at times. Like you're either the jiu-jitsu becomes this, in my opinion, unique sort of substrate that these relationships grow in, that is not, it's not like other things. Professor Lucas, that seems very consistent with your philosophy too. And
Oh,
obviously
100%.
your
Yeah.
schools have been exploding for years now. I think a lot are centered around this very notion.
Yeah, 100%. I think, especially nowadays, people can learn techniques and whatever they want. They have one friend, they watch all the PG fanatics and all the other platforms. They can keep training more, but they stay for their connection. This, you can replicate that. And sometimes like they might change the reason why they started. And I think Professor Jeff nailed and everything that he said. And I think that's making school so much stronger, the community better, and the level of connection that we have towards each other as a trained partner compared to other sports. I think it's really unique. You like to compare this a little bit of CrossFit community. I think it is really similar, but that, man, so close and submissions and tapping and trusting, right? The level of trust that you need to have towards each other, it makes this so incredibly strong, right? These bonds.
Professor Jeff, like you're, when we go back to the 90s, because Professor Lucas will talk about this too, like being in those 90s and early 2000s where things were very different, both in terms of what you might experience in a jiu-jitsu school then versus now. Also, what you would have been exposed to via TV and the vocabulary of jiu-jitsu. So I considered you to be among, for particularly in the United States, to at the beginning of jiu-jitsu's growth in the country, from my point of view, at least. And I'm curious if you had a model that you observed out there where you're like, this is somebody I want to be like. Because obviously it spoke to you directly as an art. You walked in, you're like, this is what I want to do. But in the same manner that you just described, like the personal connection matters to everybody else. My guess is that it mattered to you as well. So did you have a particular role model, either as an athlete or just as a martial artist or as even a business person, that you were like, oh, this is a model of a lifestyle I would like to emulate, when you were in those young years?
Yeah, I was lucky that my first two coaches in jiu-jitsu, and looking back at it, this is just, you get lucky with people you get involved with and just
Yeah.
with what academy you walked in. If I would have walked in a different academy, who knows what the trajectory would have been.
Right.
But my original coach was a guy named Braulio Corral, who still has a school in Northwest Indiana, close to where he started. And he's like 4th-degree black belt and has a great kids team. And he was just a blue belt at the time. And he came from a taekwondo background, like a lot of early jiu-jitsu guys, wanted to learn grappling. And he started teaching because he was the only guy who was a blue belt around. But he had just a very, simple, basic approach. I know what I know. I'm going to teach you guys some stuff. We're going to have a good, close-knit group. We're going to be just a tight family. We're going to beat each other up. We're going to try to help each other get better, just have fun on the mats. And he just made a very fun, lighthearted environment where we didn't take things too seriously, but we trained hard and just did what we could at the time with a very little resource, with a blue belt as a coach and a bunch of white belts around. And then when I went away to college, my coach, who I got my black belt under, Jack McVicker, he happened to be one of the early pioneers of competitive jiu-jitsu in America. He's medaled at the world championships at brown belt. He was going to Brazil from the early 90s, training with Megaton, Diaz, Hoyler, Hickson, all these guys. And he's happened to be in Champaign, Illinois, where I went to school. And it's one of the reasons why I chose to go there, is because I knew I could go do jiu-jitsu with somebody who was really good. But he was the same thing.
Mhm.
He was just a guy who was super friendly, never made it about these formalities. He was like, we want to get better. We want to train. We want to bring as many people as we can to train jiu-jitsu. We want to have fun doing it. We want to create a team and a close-knit group of people we can travel with, we can trust. And they never had anything where it was an idea that this was this grandmaster you had bow to and you couldn't ask questions to and you couldn't talk to. It was just, hey, we're here to have fun. And as long as everyone is here with the same goal, we're all on the same playing field. Whether you're a no-stripe white belt or either coach of the gym, we're all here as a team. And that has really made it to where that's what I wanted my gym to be. And that's what my gym is I have the same class. We have a 3rd-degree black belt, a 2nd-degree black belt, and somebody taking their first class. Everyone works together. Everyone helps. Everyone does things. There's no hierarchy where you're not allowed to do this or you can't do that, because we're all one family. And it's sometimes cliche that you're on the mats, your family, but people care about each other. And that was the 2 original gyms I walked into. That was always the case. And I still have great relationships with some of the guys I started with 25 years ago who have gotten older, don't train, but you still talk to and just care about, because life happened for them or some injuries happened, but you're still friends with them. And know that kind of connection is what I wanted to build. And I was lucky that I had really good role models early on, both the technical side of jiu-jitsu to help me with that background, but more on that, hey, this is what we should do. And again, don't put yourself ahead of everyone else just because you're coaching, or don't put yourself ahead of everyone else because you're the higher belt. Be there to help, and they're going to help you.
Yeah, I have to say that ethic, we got a chance to talk to Professor Hobson Mora and Professor Pedro Sauer, Robert Drysdale, people that had a lot of attention, Professor Eli Knight, Jason Hawkins, a lot of folks that have plenty of attention given to them. And when they come and talk with us, this ethic of togetherness, of we're just among, certainly these people are the stars of the sport, the legends of the sport, and they come and talk with a beginner like myself with the type of respect that is interesting to me, how consistent that is present in their characters, right? That this doesn't lend itself to that hierarchical, I'm up here and you're down there. It seems to lend itself to we're together and we're going to refine each other's skills and talents. And Professor Luke, you have a similar duration in the times that you have studied and maybe have been through some of the same stages here. I think you would agree with that, right? Your
Oh, totally,
experiences
yeah.
have been, people are so generous in this community.
Yeah, I honestly, I always get impressive every time that we have a guest here. Just big names like Professor Jeff, like how nice they are. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know if I would be that nice. But like, using the example of all those guys, Bernardo Faria a few weeks ago was such a great conversation. Robert Drysdale, I see him in every tournament, every major tournament. We talk a little bit with each other. We hang out. He has invite me to go to the school. So it's just, you create a good relationship, like genuine good relationship. Like that's says a lot for the community we have.
And that, so the passion that we have for it collectively, part of what the goal of the podcast is to extend that and to give people a taste that you come in to learn something specific, but you have really no idea what's going to happen and the changes that could occur in your life. So Professor Jeff, with these 26 years, my guess is you have 1,000 stories of how you've seen jiu-jitsu affect other people, but maybe I could ask you for either your favorite or one that you'd like to convey of how you saw jiu-jitsu impact a human being in some meaningful way. Do you have a story like that?
Oh yeah, I have a ton, obviously, like you said, and that's one of the things I loved about the sport and loved about being a student, seeing other students, and now being a coach, helping people on this journey. I've had students who quit taking drugs, quit drinking, lost weight, gained confidence, all these things. But there's one particular that always stands out. I had a student come in, and he told me, like, he messaged me at Instagram or Facebook. He's like, "Hey, I'm interested in jiu-jitsu. Can I come talk to you, see the gym?" I'm like, "Of course, come in." And he tells me a little bit of his stories. He was a bigger guy, and he told me he'd already lost like 70 pounds. Maybe he wanted to lose another like 150. He was 380, 400 pounds, somewhere like that. And he just got to that point where he needed to change his life. And working out just normally didn't interest him. And he had done martial arts when he was a kid. He loved UFC. So he wanted to try jujitsu. Hey, you think I can do this? And I'm like, obviously you can do it. It's going to be tough. We're going to have to change things, but the key is to get you on the mat because we want you to just have this chance to change your life. And so he started coming training, and obviously he had some physical limitations. But one of the nice things is when you're coming from a spot like that, you're going to see results quickly. You're going to start losing weight if you just be active, change your diet, have a reason to be active. And as you get to know the student, you start seeing him lose another 20 pounds, another 30 pounds. And you can start doing moves he couldn't do, positions he couldn't do.
Yeah.
Then you start to know him on a personal level. And one of the things he told me was he had never, even though I want to say he was in his late 30s, he had never had a girlfriend or asked to grow out because he didn't have confidence. And then over the course of the next year and a half, he lost 150 pounds, 170 pounds, got to like, just, you would never know he was ever that big. And then one day he tells me he'd met a girl, had the confidence to talk to her, got a girlfriend, and just had this change in his life where he now felt confident in himself and his ability to talk to people because he was forced to come in and meet all these new people, but it was awkward and he felt he was the most out of shape and he couldn't do all this stuff and no one pushed him away. And just seeing someone build the physical ability to do things they couldn't, but that mental ability to embrace, I can do the things I wanted to do, and there's not going to be this limitation because I know what I've done on the mat is going to help me and give me this confidence. And just seeing stories like that is just so fulfilling as a coach. And again, that's a person never going to compete, never cared about competing, but it's as good as somebody winning a world championship though, because that real life change is going to affect him to the rest of his life. And that's one that's always stuck with me.
And the change is not just for whatever happened with him will echo in his circle of people. He's now going to be such a different type of influence for having taken this journey and then become a different person through this experience. And then everybody that he touches in his life, he'll convey like that experience in some way, shape, or form to them. And if he becomes a dad to those children, I love these stories because I always think, okay, you're telling me about an individual, but what you're really telling me is that the constellation that this individual lives within is now affected by this story. I love the way that Professor Lucas sets up the kids courses, because I know all the good things that happen to the kids is not just of the moment, that they're going to carry those experiences for the rest of their lives. And having a coach that cares about you is one of those things as a human being. Like, they're not your parent and they're not your friend. They sit in a different sort of relationship, and a coach can help people in ways that friends and parents and siblings can't. And so anyway, thank you for sharing that. And does that student stay in touch with you? Are you still in a relationship with them?
Yep. He's still somebody who comes in, he's dealing with some health issues. Yeah. And something that happened on the mat, but he's somebody he still talks to, and he's going to be back on the mat when he gets everything ready.
Right.
And the nice thing is, and the key thing is, even though he's had these issues, he's not gained the weight back, and he stayed with it, because no matter what, and that's one of the things that's key, is that discipline to do the things that he needs to do has spread across his life. And that's where a coach is. I'm happy. So he for some reason, couldn't get back on the mat. If that discipline helped him keep those goals and keep to that good place he wanted to be, that's the most important thing.
You couldn't agree more. Professor Lucas, as we try not to monopolize the next 6 hours of Professor Jeff's time, I want to be respectful. You got any last questions before we head into the end here?
No, man, it's been a great conversation, Professor Jeff, and I pretty much agree with 100% or more as you could on everything that he's saying. So it's been such a great example for the community and ambassador for the sport. So thank you so much, Professor Jeff, and it was definitely a really pleasure to have you here with us today.
And Professor Jeff, maybe somebody might like to follow your school's social media presence or yours. So any place you'd have people find you?
For sure. Thanks for having me. It's been an awesome conversation with you guys. Anyone who's interested, you guys can check us out. We just opened a brand new gym in Evanston, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago. It's called Gym 1801. It's a state-of-the-art facility. Our goal is to make the nicest jiu-jitsu gym in North America. It has crazy amenities. Today, as we speak, we're installing our cryo chamber. We have a sauna. We have red light there. House. We have full personal training. We have a giant jiu-jitsu space with a sprung floor, custom mats, yoga, Pilates, reformer classes. We have HIIT classes. We have everything, towel service. And we're trying to be a kind of a state-of-the-art destination spot in jiu-jitsu. So anyone wants to come out to Chicago and train with us, we love having visitors and guests. You can check us out there. And then my specific jiu-jitsu program is Serafin BJJ. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, find me. And we're always competing. We're always traveling. We're always having people on for seminars. And again, we love to spread jiu-jitsu. We love to train with different people. So everyone is always welcome on our mats.
Professor Lucas, next conversation with Professor Jeff, we may need to take a field trip.
Now I'm definitely checking out the place, man. That looks amazing.
Get down there or get over there.
Spa day there after training.
That's the goal, is you guys come in, train hard. We have a juice bar on the front, get acai, get coffee, go take a cryo, go take a yoga class, then come do another jiu-jitsu class without having to leave the building. So
it sounds just a hair away from perfect. Maybe some submission coffee bar is what you need. So,
we could talk about that too.
Professor Jeff, it's a privilege. Thanks for sharing everything that you did with us. And maybe you'll come back and have another conversation in the future. Congrats on the nicest jiu-jitsu gym in North America coming along. I'm always curious about how we will be growing our art and bringing people in. And I think the experience when you walk in the door for things matters a lot. That first blush of, am I going to be okay here? Or am I not going to be okay here? Is something. And all those things that you mentioned is just going to continue to expand the audience for us. I'm grateful for you for doing everything you're doing.
Yeah, that's the goal. We want people to come in who might not feel comfortable coming into jiu-jitsu gym, but if they come in to do cryo and meet us and realize, oh, this right, jiu-jitsu guys, or you come in to do yoga, or you're coming in to do personal training, we're all the same. And if you just realize that we're all cool people, we all can do these arts together.
Yeah, I totally agree. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.